It didn't start with a whisper. It started with an email. Subject line: quick sync, 10 minutes? He knew that tone. Polite, urgent, deadly. He stepped into the glass-walled conference room like a man walking into a rainstorm. Prepared, already soaked. The room had 4 people in it. That was already 3 too many. There was no chair set for him. There was no offer of coffee. There was just a PowerPoint still on the screen from someone else's meeting, frozen on the word optimization. A middle manager cleared his throat and started reading a script. A woman from HR looked down at her iPad the entire time. And the CTO, the one who had publicly praised him just 2 weeks ago, stared at a spot on the whiteboard, like guilt could be erased if you just didn't look at the victim. You're being let go effective immediately. No warning. No lead-up. No feedback. He blinked once. In the milliseconds that followed, the room waited for the explosion. Would he yell? Cry? Argue? He did something worse. Just, okay. And smiled. The smile wasn't sarcastic. It was soft. Almost sympathetic. Because deep down he knew this wasn't about his performance. It was about politics. About threats. About a version of him that had grown too competent, too visible, too respected. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." And in that moment he lowered the estimate. When they asked if he wanted help packing his things, he shook his head. When they offered a dignified exit out the back, he declined. He walked past his coworkers with a nod. Not slow, not rushed, measured. He didn't give them what they wanted, a performance. You remember moments like that, don't you? When something explodes in your life and everyone is watching to see how you'll fall apart. And when you don't, when you refuse to scream, they get nervous. Out at his desk, someone asked, "Wait, are you leaving?" He nodded once. "I think so." And he picked up the one thing that mattered, a plain black notebook with no branding. Not even a laptop. Not even a jacket. He stepped into the elevator, and when the doors closed, his reflection stared back at him. Still calm. Still breathing. Still him. But something inside had cracked. Not from pain. From awareness. Do you know what it feels like to realize no one owes you anything? That you could give your best years to a system and still be deleted in under 2 minutes? It doesn't feel like rage. It feels like clarity. And clarity is terrifying. The streets outside didn't change. But the way he saw them did. Each horn, each footstep, each flashing billboard, all suddenly felt like distractions from something quieter beneath it all. Like life had been trying to get his attention for years. Epictetus said, "It is not events that disturb us, but our opinions about them." And his opinion, right now, was that this was not a tragedy. It was a reveal. They hadn't taken his job. They had freed him from pretending. The train ride home was long. A child screamed 3 seats over. 2 teens argued about TikTok. A woman ate something spicy out of Tupperware. But he didn't notice any of it, because in his head, a single sentence kept repeating, "This is not who I am." He wasn't just fired. He was amassed. The first sound he truly noticed was the silence. When the apartment door clicked shut behind him, there was no applause. No angry voicemails. No new emails waiting to scream. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant buzz of city traffic, and his own heartbeat, louder now than ever. He stood in his living room, which now felt far too large, and let the stillness crawl over him like fog. His phone buzzed. Slack notifications. Too late. Deleted the app. Buzzed again. LinkedIn messages. He swiped them away. Another buzz. A text from an old colleague. "Dude, WTF happened?" He turned the phone over. Face down. He didn't want to explain. Not yet. Maybe not ever. You know that moment when you leave a place that used to define you? A job, a relationship, even a home? There's a particular flavor of silence that comes next. It's not peace. It's not relief. It's the echo of your former identity, still bouncing off the walls, looking for a shape to return to. That evening, he sat by the window, a cup of lukewarm tea in hand. The city outside moved on, uncaring. No one knew what had just happened to him. No one cared. And that, strangely, was a gift, because the pressure was gone. No boss to impress. No team to lead. No KPI to chase. Just existence. Raw and unfinished. He thought of the words of Seneca. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. And isn't that true? How many times had he imagined losing this job? Had nightmares about being humiliated, discarded, irrelevant? But the reality? No one screamed. No one spit. The earth didn't shatter. It just moved on. The world's indifference, once terrifying, now felt like permission. He took a walk at midnight, hoodie on, no headphones. Just the sound of shoes on wet pavement and the occasional bark of a dog in some invisible balcony above. Under the buzz of a flickering street lamp, he asked himself, what do I do now? Not in despair, not in panic, in wonder. And for the first time in years, he realized he didn't know. Not knowing was terrifying, but also thrilling. He passed a newsstand, saw a headline about layoffs in the tech sector. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Was he just a statistic now? Maybe, but that's the thing about statistics. They don't cry. They don't rebuild. They don't walk home alone and breathe deeply on purpose. Humans do. And this man, this discarded professional, was still very much human. The next morning, he woke without an alarm. No meetings, no emails, no commute. His muscles ached in strange ways. Not from exertion, from holding tension that now had nowhere to go. He made a simple breakfast. Eggs, toast, no music, no scrolling. He sat in silence and chewed. Slowly, intentionally. And he noticed something. The food tasted better. Not because of ingredients, but because his mind wasn't elsewhere. He wasn't thinking about deadlines, or how to craft a perfect status report, or how to spin bad news to executives. He was just here. Isn't that strange? How it takes losing everything to finally taste breakfast. He remembered something Marcus Aurelius had once written. Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. And this soul? It had been begging for a retreat for years. Later that day, a friend called. He didn't answer. Then another text. You should sue. I know a guy. He smiled. Not out of amusement. Out of gratitude. He appreciated the concern. But he didn't want revenge. Revenge keeps you tethered to the thing that broke you. Stoicism teaches detachment. Not indifference, not numbness, clarity. He didn't want to fight. He wanted to understand. Why had this hurt so deeply? Was it really about the job? Or about what the job meant? For years, his self-worth had been braided into his title, his LinkedIn profile, his standing in meetings, his salary, his office view. Now that all of it was gone, what was left? That was the real silence. Not just absence of noise, but absence of false identity. And in that void, something honest could finally emerge. Historians still debate whether the Stoics were escapists, withdrawing from life's pleasures and pain, or pragmatists, engaging with life more fully by mastering their inner world. But one thing is certain, they believed that pain is unavoidable, suffering, optional. And now, sitting cross-legged on the floor of his tiny apartment, sipping cheap tea, our man was testing that theory, one breath at a time. He didn't post a single word online for weeks. No fiery takedown. No life update. No picture of coffee next to a laptop with the caption, "New chapter." Just silence. Because he realized he didn't owe the world a performance. You ever notice how fast we scramble to narrate our pain, to reframe failure before it can stain our image? But he wasn't interested in PR anymore. He wanted something quieter, something truer. Instead of tweets, he journaled. Pen to paper, the old-fashioned way. He wrote down what he feared most. Not poverty, not irrelevance, not even judgment. What he feared was stillness, because in stillness, the truth speaks. And he had spent years drowning it out with deadlines, dopamine hits, and daily chaos. His days now unfolded like long stretches of gray. No one asked him for updates. No one cared if he brushed his teeth. And in that mundane emptiness, something unexpected happened. He began noticing details. The way sunlight hit his curtain at 3:47 p.m. How the faucet dripped in a syncopated rhythm, like a jazz drummer unsure of the beat. How silence wasn't silent at all, it had texture. And then came the memories. Not the big ones. Not weddings or birthdays. The small, thorny ones. Being 12 and overlooked at a school play audition. Getting passed over for a promotion and smiling through gritted teeth. The lump in his throat when a mentor once said, "You're not leadership material." These moments weren't traumas. Just paper cuts. But they bled into his self-perception. Quietly. Steadily. Each one a tiny vote in favor of the idea that he was not enough. You ever carry a belief for so long you forget it's not truth? This man had. So when he was fired, especially so publicly, it didn't just hurt because of the embarrassment. It validated his oldest, cruelest fear. That deep down, maybe they were right. But here's the miracle of emptiness. It creates room for contradiction. As the weeks passed, he noticed something was missing. The dread, the panic, the need to prove anything to anyone. In its place, curiosity. What if being fired wasn't a confirmation of his inadequacy, but the shedding of something that was never fully him? He remembered Epictetus. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And what he was choosing now, even in confusion, even in grief, was to stay present. To sit with the ache, not escape it. One evening, he walked by his old office building. The lights were still on. People still inside. Typing. Pitching. Pretending. He didn't feel rage. Or envy. Just a quiet distance, like watching a past life through thick glass. He chuckled under his breath. A few months ago, he would have killed to be in there. Now, he felt something he hadn't expected. Relief. And maybe that was the real shock. Not that he had been let go, but that freedom could feel so peaceful. He spent more time with his brother's kids. Read books he'd once lied about finishing. Took long walks without podcasts. One day, he cried at a park bench. No reason. No warning. Just the release. Years of being the strong one, the strategic one, the professional, poured out through shaking shoulders and wet cheeks. No one noticed. Or maybe someone did, and politely pretended not to. It didn't matter. He was alone, and he was healing. And as he wiped his eyes, he laughed. Because healing doesn't always feel like triumph. Sometimes, it feels like snot and sunburn and ugly cries in public parks. Historians continue to debate how Stoics grieved, whether they saw emotion as weakness or as something to master. But Seneca wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality." And isn't it wild, how much of our suffering lives in scenarios that never even happened? He imagined humiliation. He imagined ruin. He imagined being forgotten. But here he was, breathing, walking, still him, just quieter. The noise had stopped. The mask had slipped. And for once, the man underneath wasn't afraid to be seen, even if no one was watching. The first job offer came while he was rinsing rice. A former colleague had reached out, someone he barely remembered. They were starting something small, experimental. Not your level, probably, the message read, but thought of you. He stared at the phone for a long time. It wasn't the kind of role you put on LinkedIn with a dramatic caption. It wasn't glamorous or even particularly stable, but it was honest. And after months of silence, reflection, and small awakenings, that felt like enough. So he said yes. He didn't throw a party. No long captions or comebacks. He just showed up. To a basement co-working space with cheap coffee and squeaky chairs. He carried no title now. No corner office. No interns looking to impress him. But there was something intoxicating about that. Because with nothing to prove, he could finally do the work. The actual work, not the theater around it. The irony? He was better than ever. Ideas flowed faster. Conversations went deeper. He listened more. Argued less. He didn't try to dominate rooms. He illuminated them. You ever notice how much energy we waste maintaining an image? He no longer needed to be the guy who had it all together. He could be the guy who cared. Who paid attention? Who didn't interrupt? Who didn't flinch when someone else got the credit? That's when things began to shift. People noticed. Not in loud, viral ways, but in coffee chats, forwarded emails, quiet thank yous. He built something. Slowly. A team. A culture. A rhythm. One day, during a meeting, someone said, "It just feels safe with you here." He almost cried. Because no one had ever called him safe before. Smart? Sure. Sharp? Often. But safe? That was new. That meant something deeper. That meant he had stopped being a brand and started being a person. And that, ironically, made him more powerful than ever. He thought back to that awful day. The HR email. The public dismissal. The feeling of being erased. But now, he could see it for what it really was. A doorway. Not the end of a story, the start of a truer one. Do you remember how we said he feared stillness? Now he cherished it. He started blocking time on his calendar labeled silence. Not to meditate, not to optimize, just to sit, to stare out the window, to exist without output. That's what Stoicism had taught him, not to suppress emotion, but to hold it, gently. To not flee the fire, but to step into it with eyes open. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." The man had spent a decade trying to control outcomes. Now, he focused on mastering only what was his attention, his effort, his response. A colleague asked him once, "You don't seem to get thrown by stuff anymore. What changed?" He smiled. "I stopped tying my worth to results," he said, "and started tying it to how I show up." Somewhere along the way, success had stopped being about praise or raises. It became about presence, about whether he went to sleep proud of how he moved through the day, not what he achieved, but how he behaved. And isn't that the real victory? To be unshaken in chaos, to be kind when no one's watching, to be steady when the world sways. Historians still disagree on whether Stoicism is too cold, too detached. But maybe detachment is just humility, the understanding that the world doesn't revolve around your plans. That pain will visit, but it doesn't have to define you. That you are small, but not powerless. And in that smallness, there's room to breathe. There's peace and surrender. He looked out the window of the new office, smaller than the last, but warmer somehow. He watched the light move across the desk, and he whispered something. To himself. To the silence. To the past. Thank you. Not to the people who fired him. Not to the system that rewarded burnout. Not even to the universe. But to the version of him that endured. Who didn't explode or spiral or seek revenge. Who stayed. Who softened. Who transformed. That version deserved gratitude. Because he didn't just survive being fired. He transcended it. He never posted a comeback reel. No moody black and white montage. No hashtag victory dance. He wasn't back because he never left. What happened instead was quieter. One morning, after a meeting ended, a young employee lingered. Nervous. Hesitant. And she said, "Can I ask you something personal?" He nodded. "When you got fired, how did you not lose it?" He paused. You could tell she wasn't asking for gossip. She was asking for hope. So he told her the truth. That he did lose it for a while. That the shame was real. That for weeks he had stared at ceilings and scrolled through regrets. But that eventually the noise ran out of volume. And beneath it, there was something still waiting. Like bedrock under floodwater. He didn't call it faith. Or resilience. Or even stoicism. He just called it clarity. Because that's what adversity had stripped him down to. Not ego. Not performance. Not panic. Just this question, what is mine to control? That question had saved him. And now he passed it on. Don't try to dodge the pain, he told her. Walk straight through it. Just don't let it decide who you become. It wasn't a TED Talk. It wasn't rehearsed. It was just a man talking to someone who reminded him of himself. And she exhaled. Like the air had shifted. Because it had. We think stoicism is about being stoic, stone-faced, untouchable. But it's not. It's about being capable in chaos. Not unfeeling, but undisturbed. Not robotic, but rooted. As Epictetus wrote, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This man had once reacted with fury, then with silence, then finally with stillness. You could feel it now, in how he walked, how he listened, how he forgave. His fire hadn't gone out. It had become contained, focused. Some said he had mellowed. Others said he was wiser. He said he was just done pretending. Done chasing every email like it was life or death. Done proving he belonged. He already did. He had learned that self-worth is not a project, it's a decision. And once made, it becomes your compass. One afternoon, he returned to the building where he'd been fired. Different floor, different role, but same lobby, same elevators. He thought he'd tremble, but he smiled. Not with vengeance, not with pride, but with relief. Because he realized he didn't need closure. He didn't need justice. He had rebuilt his life from scratch. And better, do you know what that does to a man? Not inflate him, ground him. It reminds him that everything can be taken, but no one can take how he responds. He stayed in that lobby for a moment, just breathing. And he thought, this is what they can never touch. This is mine. Outside, a storm was rolling in. But inside, he was still. And now, as the lights dim behind his eyes and the day stretches out like an old friend, he no longer resists the quiet. He invites it. The noise of ambition, once deafening, now feels like distant thunder behind double-glazed windows. He hears it, but it no longer shakes the glass. The man who once chased applause, who built a career on recognition and dread, now finds meaning in the unnoticed. A good conversation, a slow meal, a morning without panic. You see, Stoicism didn't erase his pain, it refined it. Like fire to steel. He learned to live with disappointment, not against it. To allow grief its room. To let joy arrive unannounced. And to trust that whatever comes will also pass. He doesn't need the world to clap anymore. He just needs to show up, fully. That is enough. It always was. So, if you've ever been humiliated, replaced, left behind, let this be your proof. You are not the storm. You are the ship, and you will sail again. What do you do when everything falls apart? Do you resist, or do you rebuild? Tell me in the comments below. And if this story moved you, like, subscribe, and join us for the next episode of Real People, Stoic Lives.